Hello, my name is Kira Bembrick and today we'll be presenting examples made by the Indigenous people looking at the concept of identity within the Indigeneity in relation to our course. I'll be using Stephen Oliver's art form spoken word to illustrate the concept of identity. Stephen Oliver, who is a successful Indigenous Australian in the arts of Indigenous culture, having the passion of being known as a famous comedian, poet and actor. Identity is the term of individual characteristics by which a thing or a person is recognised. Identity is determining someone's own culture, values and beliefs over a particular group. When disconnected from an Indigenous culture, will have a massive impact on their sense of identity. Identity has been a difficult concept towards determining who's Indigenous or not. Misrepresentations of classifying Indigenous peoples into castes are defined as full blood, half caste and quarter caste. Using unacceptable language used to stereotype Indigenous peoples are considered offensive and racist. Identity is extremely important towards Indigenous culture, demonising a culture which shapes their own identity. Identity and knowledge of their own culture were denied to Aboriginal individuals. Their experience was highlighted with Indigenous issues of racism and poor self-image. Stephen Oliver is an Aboriginal Australian who is a successful art-based poet who represents Indigeneity. An example of his poem, Real, integrates the meaning of challenging Indigenous identity.
I was more of a brown, he went on to explain. He's voiced the whole time with a certain disdain. He stayed a bit longer and said, I suppose when I look at your face, I see a bit of the nose. Oh, I said, a bit taken aback to this obvious expert on everything black, my head in a muddle just trying to see why this man had a need to be questioning me. He stayed a bit longer, so I said to the guy, are you waiting for me to try and justify the complexities of identity when it comes to Aboriginality?
Stephen Oliver explains that he looked at my skin and said I wasn't even black. Stephen Oliver portrays in his poem how you don't have to look or act Indigenous to fit into a society. It is still evident in today that we still challenge those Indigenous identity by appearance. We need to respect Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander people, even though they have other bloodlines in them. Therefore, this is evident that Stephen Oliver has mixed bloodlines and is trying to convince society that you don't have to look to be Indigenous. He wants the society to respect Indigenous people and not provide racism towards that. The shame we speak of Indigenous identity is a factor of developing the habit of substance abuse. Therefore, this relates to the AISTL Standard 2, Know Your Student and How They Learn. Strategies for teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. As pre-service teachers, we need to enable to demonstrate a broad range of knowledge and understanding towards Indigenous students, recognising diverse backgrounds and impact on culture identity and linguistic background. Stephen Oliver is a proud Indigenous Australian and he's not afraid to say he is. However, because he has other bloodlines, people think it's okay to question his own identity. But claiming that you're not an Aboriginal when it's obvious that you're not really a fool. Stephen is trying to engage readers to understand that Indigenous peoples that are part Indigenous should be recognised as an Aboriginal Australian, because questioning someone's own identity is very racist and unnecessary, because Indigenous culture is very important to recognise our first ever Australians. For every Australian, we need to learn about the Indigenous culture and traditions, as well as becoming aware of our own. This will bring less conflict and discrimination towards Indigenous people. If we are able to bring awareness towards the Indigenous issue of challenging Indigenous identity, by becoming more aware and feel a sense of belonging, knowing that white society don't discriminate or stereotype an Indigenous person by their appearance or colour. As young future educators, by creating a more diversity, safe, inclusive environment, will allow everyone to appreciate each other. In conclusion, our role as future educators is to acknowledge our first Australian peoples and how we can shape a positive self-identity towards Indigenous Australians in the community. We should allow all students to embrace their own identity, which will bring a sense of pride and belonging towards diverse students in our community. Imagine putting yourself into someone else's shoes, like Stephen Oliver. And how would you feel if someone else challenged your own identity?